I was 3 weeks into building my dream backyard workshop in Phoenix, Arizona, when Patricia Whitmore appeared at my property line holding a clipboard like it was a royal decree. "This must stop immediately," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut through the sound of my contractor's circular saw. "You're in violation of multiple HOA regulations, and I'm issuing a cease and desist order effective immediately." I wiped the sweat from my forehead and walked over to where she stood, her perfectly pressed linen pantsuit somehow immune to the 100-degree heat. Patricia was the president of the Saguaro Heights Homeowners Association, a position she'd held for 7 years and wielded like a weapon against anyone who dared to make improvements without kissing her ring first. "Patricia, I have all my permits," I said, keeping my voice level. "The city approved everything. I submitted the plans to the HOA Architectural Committee 2 months ago." She thrust a yellow paper toward me, and I recognized it as one of those official-looking cease and desist orders the HOA loved to print on fancy letterhead. "Your submission was incomplete. You failed to include proper elevation drawings, material specifications, and impact assessments. Furthermore, your construction is creating noise disturbances during prohibited hours, and your materials are stored in violation of community standards." I took the paper and scanned it quickly. The list of violations was absurd. Noise disturbances during prohibited hours, except all my work was happening between 9 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, well within the allowed time frame. Materials stored improperly when everything was neatly stacked on my own property behind my fence. Incomplete submissions when I had certified mail receipts proving I'd sent everything required. "I have documentation for all of this," I told her, "and I'm well within my rights. The city building department approved my plans, I paid for my permits, and everything is being done by licensed contractors." Patricia's lips pursed into a thin line. "The city and the HOA are separate entities, Mr. Morrison. Your city permits don't supersede our community regulations. If you continue construction, we'll be forced to take legal action, and you'll be responsible for all associated fees and fines. Daily fines of $200 will begin accruing immediately." My contractor, Miguel, had stopped working and was watching the exchange with concern. He'd built dozens of structures in this neighborhood and knew the drill. HOA presidents like Patricia thrived on creating problems where none existed, usually because they enjoyed the power or had some personal grudge. "I'll see you at the next board meeting," I said. "And I'll bring every piece of documentation I have. The board meeting isn't for 3 weeks," Patricia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Until then, all work stops. If I see any construction activity, the fines will increase to $500 per day, and we'll seek an injunction." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there with Miguel and his crew of 3 guys who were all looking at me for direction. "Can she actually do that?" Miguel asked. "She can try," I said, "but she's not going to win." I'd bought this house in Saguaro Heights 2 years ago, drawn by the mountain views and the spacious lots that gave everyone room to breathe. The HOA had seemed reasonable at first, with basic rules about keeping yards maintained and not painting your house neon purple. But Patricia had taken over as president about 6 months after I moved in, and things had changed quickly. Suddenly there were rules about what kind of mailbox you could have, what hours you could run your sprinklers, and whether your garage door could be open for more than 15 minutes at a time. The workshop I was building wasn't some massive structure. It was a 16 by 20-foot building with proper foundation, electrical, and insulation. I planned to use it for woodworking, a hobby I'd picked up during the pandemic and had grown passionate about. My garage was too small and too hot, and I had the space in my backyard. The city had approved everything without hesitation. The plans met all setback requirements, height restrictions, and building codes. I'd submitted everything to the HOA's Architectural Review Committee exactly as their governing documents required. I'd included site plans, elevation drawings, material lists, and even paint samples to show that the exterior would match my house. I'd sent it via certified mail and gotten a signature confirmation. I'd followed up with emails. I'd done everything by the book. And now Patricia was claiming my submission was incomplete. I went inside and pulled out my file folder, the one where I kept copies of everything. I had the certified mail receipt showing delivery on January 15th. I had the email I'd sent to the architectural committee with all the attachments. I had the city building permits, approved and paid for, with the official stamps. I had the contractor's license information, the engineering calculations for the foundation, and even a letter from my insurance company confirming coverage. My wife Sarah came into the home office and saw me surrounded by papers. "Let me guess," she said. "Patricia." She issued a cease and desist, says my submission was incomplete and I'm violating noise ordinances and storage rules. Sarah sat down in the chair across from my desk. She'd been skeptical about the workshop project from the beginning, not because she didn't support my woodworking, but because she knew Patricia would find some way to make it difficult. Sarah was a lawyer, though her specialty was family law, not HOA disputes. But she understood how these things worked. "You have everything documented?" she asked. "Everything. Certified mail, emails, permits, the works. Then she doesn't have a leg to stand on, but you know she's going to make this as painful as possible." I nodded. Patricia had a reputation. She'd forced the Hendersons 3 doors down to repaint their house, because the beige they'd chosen was 2 shades too dark, according to the approved color palette. She'd fined the Chens $8,000 for installing solar panels without HOA approval, even though state law explicitly protected homeowners' rights to install solar. She tried to foreclose on old Mrs. Martinez for having brown spots in her lawn during a drought. "I'm not backing down on this," I said. "I followed every rule. I did everything right. She's just mad because I didn't come crawling to her first and beg for permission." That was the real issue, I suspected. When I'd first started planning the workshop, I'd mentioned it casually at a neighborhood barbecue. Patricia had been there and had immediately started telling me all the hoops I'd need to jump through, all the special approvals, all the conditions she'd require. I'd smiled and nodded and then gone ahead and followed the actual written rules in the HOA governing documents rather than Patricia's arbitrary demands. The next morning, I called my insurance agent to make sure I was covered for any legal action. Then I called a lawyer friend who specialized in construction disputes. His name was Robert Chen, and we'd gone to college together before he'd gone to law school and I'd gone into software engineering. "HOA dispute?" Robert asked when I explained the situation. "Those are always fun." "Let me guess, power-hungry board president who thinks she runs a kingdom? You've met Patricia, I see." "I don't need to meet her. They're all the same. Send me everything you have. I want copies of your governing documents, your submission, your permits, and this cease and desist order." I spent the next hour scanning and emailing documents. Robert called me back before lunch. "Okay, so here's the situation," he said. "Your HOA's governing documents clearly state that the Architectural Review Committee has 30 days to respond to a submission. If they don't respond within 30 days, the submission is automatically approved. You submitted on January 15th. It's now March 7th. They're way past their deadline. So I'm in the clear. You're absolutely in the clear." The automatic approval clause is pretty standard in Arizona HOA law. They can't claim your submission was incomplete after sitting on it for almost 2 months. If they had issues, they needed to request additional information within that 30-day window. They didn't, so tough luck for them. What about the cease and desist? It's not worth the paper it's printed on. You have valid city permits, you're following all local building codes, and the HOA's own rules say you're approved. If they try to fine you or take legal action, you can countersue for harassment and recover your legal fees. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. So I can keep building, you can keep building, but document everything. Take photos, keep records of all your work hours, save any communications from the HOA. If Patricia escalates this, you want to be able to prove she's acting in bad faith. I thanked Robert and called Miguel to tell him we were back in business. He and his crew showed up the next morning and we got back to work on the foundation. The concrete had already been poured the week before, and now we were ready to start framing. Around 10 in the morning, Patricia's white Lexus pulled up in front of my house. She got out, still armed with her clipboard, and marched through my front gate without knocking or announcing herself. "I told you to stop construction," she said, her voice shrill. "I'm documenting this violation and the fines are now $500 per day." "Patricia, I'm not violating anything," I said. "I have legal permits, and according to your own HOA documents, my plans were automatically approved when your committee failed to respond within 30 days. "That's not how it works," she snapped. "Automatic approval doesn't apply when the submission is incomplete." My submission wasn't incomplete. I have proof that I sent everything required. Certified mail receipt, email confirmations, everything. If you believed something was missing, you should have requested it within the 30-day window. You didn't. Patricia's face was turning red, a combination of anger and the Arizona sun. "This is going to the board and then to our attorney. You're going to regret not following proper procedures." "I did follow proper procedures. Your procedures. And if you keep harassing me, my attorney will be very interested in discussing your violation of Arizona's HOA statutes regarding good faith administration." I watched as that landed. Patricia was used to intimidating people who didn't know their rights, who assumed the HOA had unlimited power. But I'd done my homework, and I had a lawyer backing me up. "You'll hear from our attorney," she said, and stalked back to her car. Miguel had watched the whole thing. "That lady is crazy," he said. "That lady is about to learn an expensive lesson," I replied. Work continued. We got the frame up over the next few days and the structure started to take shape. It was going to be beautiful when it was finished, with big windows for natural light, proper ventilation, and enough space for all my tools and workbenches. I was already imagining the projects I'd build there on day 4 of construction. I got a letter from the HOA's attorney. It was full of legal language and threats, claiming I was in violation of the governing documents, that I was subject to fines and potential foreclosure, and that I needed to cease all construction immediately and submit to binding arbitration. I forwarded it to Robert, who called me an hour later laughing. "This is the worst demand letter I've seen in months," he said. "They're citing provisions that don't even exist in your CC and Articus. They're threatening foreclosure over a properly permitted structure. And they're demanding arbitration when they don't have any grounds for a claim. So what do? I'll draft a response. We'll lay out the facts, cite the automatic approval provision, reference your permits, and politely suggest that they withdraw their cease and desist and their threats before this gets embarrassing for them. Will that work? Probably not. Patricia sounds like the type who'd rather spend $20,000 of HOA money on legal fees than admit she was wrong. But we have to give them the chance to back down before we escalate. Robert sent his response letter the next day. It was professional but firm, with citations to specific sections of Arizona HOA law and the community's own governing documents. It pointed out that I had complied with all requirements, that the 30-day automatic approval had kicked in, and that any further harassment would result in a counterclaim for damages and attorney fees. The HOA's response came 3 days later. They were doubling down. Their attorney claimed that the automatic approval provision didn't apply to major structures, that my workshop qualified as a major structure requiring special approval, and that the board had the authority to revoke any approvals that didn't meet community standards. "They're making this up as they go," Robert said when I forwarded him the new letter. There's no definition of major structure in your documents that would include a 16 by 20 workshop, and the board can't retroactively revoke an automatic approval. That's not how any of this works. So what now? Now we file a lawsuit. We'll seek a declaratory judgment that you're in compliance with all HOA rules, an injunction preventing them from interfering with your construction, and damages for harassment. Once we file, they'll either settle quickly or spend a fortune defending the indefensible. I talked it over with Sarah that night. Filing a lawsuit felt like a big step, but Patricia had left us no choice. She was threatening daily fines that would add up to thousands of dollars. She was trying to force me to tear down construction that was being done properly and legally, and she was wasting HOA money on legal fees to pursue a vendetta. "Do it," Sarah said. "Someone needs to stand up to her. If you don't, she'll just keep doing this to other people." Robert filed the lawsuit the following week in Maricopa County Superior Court. The complaint laid out everything in clear detail. My compliance with the submission requirements, the automatic approval after 30 days, my valid city permits, and the HOA's baseless harassment. We asked for declaratory relief, injunctive relief, and damages including attorney fees. The lawsuit got served on Patricia personally, as president of the HOA and on the HOA's attorney. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had a meltdown when she got served, screaming at the process server and calling an emergency board meeting. Construction continued. Miguel and his crew were making excellent progress. The walls were up, the roof was on, and we were working on electrical and insulation. The structure looked professional and solid, exactly matching the plans I'd submitted. 2 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, I got a knock on my door. It was Dennis Murphy, one of the other HOA board members. Dennis was a reasonable guy, a retired accountant who'd gotten roped into serving on the board because nobody else wanted to volunteer. "Can I come in?" Dennis asked. "I want to talk to you off the record." I invited him in and offered him a beer. We sat in my living room and Dennis looked uncomfortable. "Look, I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with Patricia," he said. "When you submitted your plans, they came to the architectural committee meeting. I'm on that committee. We looked at them and they were fine. Everything was there, everything was compliant, we were going to approve them." So what happened? Patricia happened. She convinced the committee chair, Brenda Watson, that we should table the approval pending additional review. Brenda's afraid of Patricia, so she went along with it. Then Patricia kept delaying and delaying, saying she wanted to consult with experts, saying she needed to review precedents, just making up reasons not to approve it. "Why?" Dennis sighed. "Because you didn't kiss her ring. I've seen her do this before. If you want to do anything in this neighborhood, you're supposed to come to Patricia first, ask for her blessing, maybe offer to contribute to her pet projects. You just followed the written rules and that made her feel like you were disrespecting her authority. That's insane. It is insane." But that's how Patricia operates. And now she's convinced the board to spend HOA money fighting this lawsuit because she refuses to admit she was wrong. "How much money are we talking about?" The attorney is charging $300 an hour. "We've already spent over $6,000 and we haven't even filed a response yet. If this goes to trial, it could be $50,000 or more," I whistled. "The HOA doesn't have that kind of money just sitting around." "No, we don't. We'll have to do a special assessment." That means every homeowner in Saguaro Heights will have to pay extra fees to cover Patricia's ego trip. The other homeowners are going to love that. "They're not going to love it," Dennis agreed. "Which is why I'm here. I'm going to call for a special meeting to remove Patricia as president." I've been talking to other board members and other homeowners. A lot of people are sick of her bullying and her power trips. This lawsuit might be the catalyst we need to finally get rid of her. "I appreciate that, Dennis. But even if you remove her as president, the HOA is still a party to this lawsuit." "I know. But if we get new leadership, we can settle. We can acknowledge that you were right, withdraw the cease and desist and move on. That's what should have happened from the beginning." Dennis left, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't turn into the prolonged legal battle Robert had predicted. Maybe reason would prevail. But Patricia wasn't done yet. 3 days later, I came home from work to find a code enforcement officer from the city of Phoenix at my property. He was inspecting the workshop with a clipboard and a camera. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I'm responding to a complaint," he said. "Someone reported unpermitted construction at this address. I have permits. Let me get them for you." I went inside and grabbed my permit folder. The inspector reviewed everything carefully, then did a thorough inspection of the construction. Finally, he nodded. "Everything looks good," he said. "Your permits are valid, the work is being done to code, and I don't see any violations. Whoever called this in was wasting my time. Let me guess." "Patricia Whitmore from the HOA," the inspector smiled slightly. "I can't tell you who filed the complaint, but I will note in my report that this was a frivolous complaint and that the property is in full compliance." After he left, I called Robert and told him what had happened. "That's actually good for us," Robert said. "It shows a pattern of harassment. She's not just using HOA channels to bully you, she's trying to use government agencies to do her dirty work. That's going to look very bad in front of a judge." The special meeting that Dennis had called happened the following week. I didn't attend because it seemed like it might be awkward, but Sarah went to observe. According to the HOA bylaws, 20% of homeowners could petition for a special meeting, and Dennis had gotten the signatures. The agenda item was simple: a vote of no confidence in Patricia Whitmore and her removal as board president. Sarah came home and gave me the full report. "It was a bloodbath," she said. "Patricia tried to shut down the meeting, claiming it was improperly called. But Dennis had done everything by the book. Then homeowners started standing up and talking about all the ways Patricia had harassed them over the years. The Hendersons talked about their paint situation. The Chens talked about the solar panels. Mrs. Martinez talked about almost losing her house over some dead grass. It went on for 2 hours. Did they vote? They voted. Patricia was removed as president by a margin of 68 to 12. Dennis was elected as the new president. And the board passed a resolution to settle your lawsuit and withdraw all claims against you. I felt relief wash over me. So it's over. Patricia did make one last threat. She stood up and said this wasn't over, that she'd make sure you regretted crossing her, that she had connections and resources. But honestly, she just looked unhinged. Security had to escort her out when she refused to leave after the meeting was adjourned. The next day, Dennis called me. "On behalf of the HOA board, I want to apologize for how you were treated. Your construction was always compliant, and you should never have been issued a cease and desist. We're going to settle the lawsuit and pay your attorney fees. I'm also going to make sure our governing documents get updated so this can't happen again. I appreciate that, Dennis, and thank you for standing up. Thank you for fighting back. A lot of people just cave when Patricia goes after them. You showed everyone that the HOA isn't some all-powerful entity that can ignore its own rules." Robert negotiated the settlement over the next week. The HOA agreed to withdraw all claims, acknowledge that I was in compliance, pay my attorney fees of $8,000 and issue a written apology. It was everything we'd asked for, but Patricia wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, late on a Thursday night, I was woken up by a loud crash. I ran outside to find that someone had thrown a brick through one of the workshop windows. The glass was shattered, and there was damage to the interior where the brick had hit my new workbench. I called the police, and they came out to take a report. The officer asked if I had any idea who might have done it. "I have a pretty good idea," I said, and told him about Patricia and the HOA dispute. "Do you have any evidence it was her?" "Not direct evidence, no. Without evidence, there's not much we can do. I'll file the report, and you can give the case number to your insurance company." I filed a claim with my insurance, and they covered the window replacement. But I also installed security cameras around my property, pointing at the workshop and the street. If Patricia or anyone else tried something again, I'd have video evidence. The cameras proved to be a good investment because 3 nights later, they caught Patricia herself walking up to my workshop at 2 in the morning and spray painting profanities on the side wall. The video was crystal clear, showing her face, her distinctive white Lexus parked on the street, and the entire act of vandalism. I called the police the next morning and showed them the footage. This time they took it seriously. "That's clear evidence of criminal damage," the officer said. "We'll go have a talk with Miss Whitmore." They did more than talk. They arrested Patricia for criminal damage, a misdemeanor in Arizona. She spent several hours in jail before posting bail. The prosecutor's office filed charges, and suddenly, Patricia was facing the consequences of her vendetta. But she still wasn't done. While out on bail, Patricia started a campaign in the neighborhood, going door to door and telling people that I was a dangerous troublemaker who was trying to destroy the community. She created a Facebook group called Save Saguaro Heights and posted wild allegations about me, claiming I was planning to turn my workshop into an illegal rental unit, that I was operating a business without proper licensing, that I was planning more unpermitted construction. It was all lies, but some people believed her. I started getting dirty looks from neighbors I'd always had friendly relationships with. Someone left a nasty note on my car. The Hendersons, who'd spoken against Patricia at the special meeting, had their tires slashed. This had escalated beyond an HOA dispute. Patricia was engaging in harassment, vandalism, and defamation. Robert advised me to document everything and consider a restraining order. "She's spiraling," he said. "People like this, when they lose power and control, they sometimes double down in destructive ways. You need to protect yourself." I filed for a restraining order, submitting the video evidence of the vandalism, screenshots of her Facebook posts, and statements from neighbors who'd witnessed her harassment. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, prohibiting Patricia from coming within 300 feet of me or my property, and from posting about me on social media. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia's attorney tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that it was a civil dispute that had gotten out of hand. But the prosecutor wasn't having it. The vandalism was on video, clear as day, and it was a crime regardless of the underlying dispute. Meanwhile, my workshop was finally finished. Miguel and his crew did an amazing job. The exterior matched my house perfectly with the same stucco and trim colors. The interior was everything I'd dreamed of, with plenty of power outlets, excellent lighting, and space for all my equipment. The windows that Patricia had smashed had been replaced with even better ones, impact-resistant glass that would be harder to break. I threw a completion party and invited the neighbors, partly to celebrate and partly to show everyone that I'd built something reasonable and appropriate, not the monstrosity Patricia had claimed. Dennis came, and the Hendersons and the Chens and Mrs. Martinez, and dozens of others. People admired the craftsmanship and asked questions about my woodworking projects. "This is exactly what our neighborhood needs," Mrs. Martinez said. "People investing in their properties, making improvements, creating spaces they love." Patricia tried to make you the villain, but you're actually making this community better. The criminal trial happened in June. Patricia pleaded not guilty and insisted she was innocent, claiming someone must have stolen her car and her spray paint and impersonated her on my security cameras. It was a ridiculous defense, and the jury didn't buy it. They found her guilty of criminal damage after deliberating for less than an hour. The judge sentenced her to 6 months probation, a $5,000 fine, restitution for the damage she'd caused, and 100 hours of community service. He also made the restraining order permanent and added a stern lecture about how disputes between neighbors should be handled through proper channels, not through vandalism and harassment. Patricia's husband, a quiet man I'd only met a few times, filed for divorce 2 weeks later. According to neighborhood gossip, he was mortified by his wife's behavior and the criminal conviction. He'd apparently tried to talk her into settling the HOA dispute months ago, but she'd refused to listen. The HOA held elections in August, and Dennis was officially elected president with overwhelming support. He appointed new members to the Architectural Review Committee and worked with an attorney to revise the governing documents, making the rules clearer and adding safeguards against arbitrary enforcement. "We want to be the kind of HOA that protects property values without making people's lives miserable," Dennis told me. "The rules should be reasonable, they should be applied fairly, and board members should remember they're volunteers serving the community, not dictators ruling over subjects." I started getting commissions for custom furniture, word of mouth spreading about my woodworking skills. The workshop became exactly what I'd envisioned, a space where I could create and build and escape the stress of my day job. I built a dining table for the Hendersons, a bookshelf for the Chens, and a beautiful hope chest for Mrs. Martinez's granddaughter. Patricia moved out of Saguaro Heights in September. She sold her house and left the state entirely, supposedly to live with her sister in Oregon. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The new family that bought her house seemed normal and friendly, and they laughed when I told them the story of the workshop battle. "We almost didn't buy here because the real estate agent warned us about HOA drama," the husband said. "But then we found out that the source of the drama had just been removed, and that seemed like good timing." Life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in a desert suburb of Phoenix. The workshop stood as a testament to the importance of knowing your rights, standing your ground, and not letting bullies with clipboards intimidate you into abandoning legitimate projects. Sarah and I hosted Thanksgiving that year, and I smoked a turkey in my new outdoor kitchen setup, another project I'd completed with proper permits and zero HOA interference. Dennis and his wife came, and the Hendersons and the Chens, and several other neighbors. We ate and drank and laughed, and someone proposed a toast. "To standing up to tyranny," Dennis said, raising his glass, "even when that tyranny comes with a clipboard and a bad attitude." Everyone cheered, and I felt grateful. Grateful for a legal system that protected homeowners' rights. Grateful for neighbors who'd supported me. Grateful for attorneys like Robert who knew how to fight HOA overreach. And grateful that I'd trusted my instincts and refused to be bullied. The story could have ended there, but there was one final twist. In December, I received a letter from an attorney representing Patricia Whitmore. She was suing me for defamation, claiming that I'd spread false information about her that had damaged her reputation and led to her criminal conviction and divorce. She was seeking $200,000 in damages. I showed the letter to Robert, expecting him to be concerned. Instead, he laughed so hard he almost fell out of his chair. "This is the stupidest lawsuit I've ever seen," he said. "She's claiming you defamed her by telling the truth about things she actually did, things she was convicted of in criminal court. This is going to get thrown out so fast it'll make her head spin, and she'll probably end up paying sanctions for filing a frivolous lawsuit." Robert filed a motion to dismiss, citing Arizona's anti-SLAPP statute that protected people from lawsuits designed to silence them for speaking about matters of public concern. He argued that everything I'd said about Patricia was true and documented, that her criminal conviction was a matter of public record, and that her lawsuit was retaliatory and meritless. The judge agreed and dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning Patricia couldn't refile it. The judge also ordered Patricia to pay my attorney fees for defending against the frivolous lawsuit, another $8,000 she now owed me. "Is she ever going to stop?" I asked Robert. "She's stopped now," he said. "She's out of money, out of credibility, and out of options. This is over." And it was. I never heard from Patricia Whitmore again. The last I heard, she was working in retail somewhere in Oregon, a far cry from her days as the tyrannical president of Saguaro Heights HOA. The workshop became my sanctuary. I spent evenings and weekends there, creating pieces that brought me joy and satisfaction. I taught woodworking classes for kids in the neighborhood, using the space to pass on skills and knowledge. The Chen's teenage son became a regular student, and he ended up pursuing carpentry as a career. Dennis served as HOA president for 4 years before passing the torch to someone else. Under his leadership, the community thrived. Property values increased, not because of strict enforcement of arbitrary rules, but because people felt free to invest in and improve their homes. The Architectural Review Committee approved reasonable projects promptly and fairly. Disputes were handled with common sense and communication rather than threats and cease and desist orders. I learned a lot from the experience. I learned that HOAs, while sometimes necessary, can become tools of oppression when run by the wrong people. I learned that knowing your rights and having good documentation is crucial when dealing with bureaucratic bullies. I learned that standing up for yourself can inspire others to do the same. And I learned that communities are stronger when they're built on mutual respect rather than fear and intimidation. My workshop still stands, solid and beautiful, a monument to persistence and the rule of law. Every time I walk into it, I remember the battle it took to build it, and I feel proud. Not just proud of the structure itself, but proud that I didn't back down, didn't give in, and didn't let Patricia Whitmore's petty tyranny prevent me from creating something meaningful. The building permits that proved I was compliant hang framed on the workshop wall, along with the settlement agreement from the HOA and the dismissal order from Patricia's frivolous defamation lawsuit. They're reminders that the system works when you know how to use it, that bullies can be defeated, and that standing up for your rights is always worth the effort. In the end, the workshop cost me more than I'd originally budgeted. The legal fees, even with the settlements and awards, added up. The stress and aggravation took a toll, but it was worth every penny and every sleepless night because I didn't just build a workshop. I helped dismantle a culture of fear and intimidation in my community, and I showed my neighbors that they didn't have to accept abuse from people who'd forgotten that an HOA board is supposed to serve homeowners, not rule over them. On warm Arizona evenings, I sit in my workshop with the big windows open, working on a project with good music playing, and I think about how close I came to giving up. If I'd listened to Patricia's first cease and desist order, if I'd backed down and abandoned the project, I'd have lost something more important than a workshop. I'd have lost my self-respect and my faith in the principle that right matters more than power. The workshop represents freedom. Freedom to improve your property, freedom to pursue your hobbies, freedom to stand up to bullies who hide behind rules they selectively enforce. It's a 16 by 20-foot monument to the idea that homeowners have rights, that those rights matter, and that defending them is worth the fight. Years later, new families move into Saguaro Heights and eventually someone asks about the story of the workshop. The tale has become neighborhood legend, growing slightly in the telling, but the core facts remain true. There was an HOA president who abused her power. There was a homeowner who fought back with permits and documentation and the law. There was a community that finally stood up and said enough. And there was a workshop, properly permitted and fully compliant, that still stands as proof that doing things the right way, even when it's hard, even when people with clipboards try to stop you, is always the path worth taking. I won because I was right. I won because I had evidence. I won because I didn't give up. And I won because the system, for all its flaws, still protects people who follow the rules against people who make up rules as they go along. The workshop is more than just a building now. It's a symbol, a story, and a lesson. It's proof that homeowners don't have to accept arbitrary authority, that HOA boards can be held accountable, and that standing your ground against injustice is not just possible but necessary. Every board I cut, every joint I glue, every piece of furniture I build in that workshop carries the weight of that victory. Not a victory over Patricia Whitmore personally, though she certainly lost, but a victory over the mindset that says regular people can't fight back against institutional bullying, that you should just accept whatever petty tyrants tell you, that resistance is futile. My workshop proves that resistance isn't futile, it's essential. And when you're in the right, when you have your documentation and your permits and your evidence, you can win. You can build your dream despite the obstacles. You can stand up to the bullies. You can make it stop. And sometimes, if you're lucky and persistent and brave enough to see it through, you don't just win for yourself. You win for everyone who comes after you, everyone who will live in a better community because you refuse to accept injustice, everyone who will be inspired by your example to stand up for their own rights. That's what my workshop means to me. That's why fighting for it mattered. And that's why, whenever someone asks if it was worth all the trouble, I always say yes without hesitation. Because some battles are worth fighting, some principles are worth defending, and some victories echo far beyond the individual who wins them. The workshop stands. The permits were valid. I was compliant. Patricia was wrong. And justice, however long it took and however much it cost, ultimately prevailed. That's a story worth telling, a lesson worth learning, and a workshop worth building, no matter how many cease and desist orders tried to stop it.